You not only force our son to do all the household chores and childcare, but now you're after our money too. Get out of this house. You leeching bum, you're only bringing in $700. My mother-in-law's voice was a harsh, piercing scream, and her hand was gripping a knife menacingly. The cold sweat that broke out on my forehead was nothing compared to the heartbreak I felt. I had been juggling work and child-rearing in place of my unemployed husband, and now this was the thanks I got. I could take no more. Abandoning the chores, I grabbed my child and decided to return to my parents' house. My name is Emily, 23 years old, and I live with my husband, our child, and my mother-in-law. My husband, Richard, was a senior at my high school, an admired soccer star and student president. When he came back to our hometown with a job, I was stunned when he approached me. After a few dates, our relationship became serious. Even as an adult, he was the handsome, charming boyfriend everyone envied. After graduating from vocational school, I discovered I was pregnant. Though the timing wasn't ideal, I believed I could still have a happy life with Richard and our child. However, my dreams began to unravel when we discussed our future. How about we move into my parents' house after we get married? Richard suggested. Why? I was hoping it would just be the three of us with our child. It'll be less expensive if we live with my parents. But if we both work, we can afford an apartment, right? Well, my income this month isn't great. How bad? Less than $1,000. Why is it so low? You said you were working at an IT company. I actually quit that job. Now I'm making some money at the casino and working part-time. At the casino? Why would you do that? He had left his IT job after only a month. If you're willing to cover all the expenses, living in an apartment is fine. His indifferent tone made me uneasy. Was I the only one excited about our new life? Sensing my anxiety, Richard took my hands and promised, "It's only temporary until I find a better job. I'll make you happy, Emily. I'll handle the housework and childcare until then." Trusting his words, we got married and moved into his parents' house. After giving birth, I threw myself into taking care of our son, hoping for a better future. Both Richard and my mother-in-law seemed content, and I was optimistic. But even after our baby was born, Richard did nothing around the house and spent his time at the casino. Another trip to the casino? What about the housework and childcare? I asked, reminding him of his broken promise. Richard's response was a furious outburst. Don't tell me what to do. My confusion grew as mother-in-law arrived, drawn by the commotion. What's going on here? Oh, it's just that Emily is busy with work and wants me to handle the housework and childcare. What? That's a wife's job. Mother-in-law's anger was palpable. Richard had never mentioned quitting his job. Instead, he painted me as the lazy wife, pushing all responsibilities onto him. Mother-in-law, who had initially been kind, now despised me after buying into his deceit. Richard continued his part-time work and casino visits, earning around $700 a month, which he often lost trying to double. Meanwhile, I covered most of our living expenses. Our lives became increasingly difficult with me not working, so I started working again after dropping our son off at a childcare center. Thankfully, my dental hygienist qualifications helped me secure a job quickly. However, every evening when I came home, I was met with my mother-in-law's scathing reprimands. What time do you think it is? This isn't playtime. You're a parent, yet you act like you have nothing to do. Get dinner on the table now. In her frustration, she would often slam the newspaper onto the floor or, when really upset, even smash plates. Her temper was volatile. Even the smallest irritation could set her off. The constant fear of what she might do next kept me compliant, but balancing childcare, work, and housework left me utterly exhausted, both mentally and physically. Reaching my breaking point, I decided to confront Richard before he left for the casino one morning. Richard, I can't keep up with everything on my own. Couldn't you help with the baby a bit? What? I've told you, I'm busy. I'm trying to find a new job. You'd rather I stay unemployed forever. If that happens, you'd be in trouble. Just do what you're supposed to do. But we're barely making ends meet. I'm using my savings to cover our food costs. Diapers are expensive, and you're not contributing anything from your casino earnings. I was footing most of our living expenses. Mother-in-law had started demanding $500 a month for utilities, forcing me to dig into my savings, which were quickly depleting. Even food expenses were draining my funds, which had originally come from a part-time job I held during school. Enough. How dare you talk back? You have a lot of nerve complaining after moving into my house. Richard, who was usually kind, became unrecognizable when it came to money or his casino habits. Hearing the commotion, mother-in-law stormed in. What's happening now? Is your wife complaining again? Yes, she is. She's demanding I do housework and childcare, plus pay for living expenses. How shameless of you, Richard, you should go to work. Right, I'll be going. With that, Richard left. As soon as he was out the door, mother-in-law's demeanor hardened. You have some nerve, pushing childcare and household duties onto us and demanding money. You should be ashamed. I'm not demanding anything, I just need a bit of help because it's incredibly hard on my own. You must be squandering money. Are you careless with finances? Mother-in-law didn't understand the full picture. She was unaware that Richard had quit his job and was now spending all his time at the casino. I was told to remain silent, but I was at my breaking point. Richard isn't contributing anything. He quit his job after just a month and now spends all his time at the casino. What are you talking about? Richard has always been exceptional. He might have missed college entrance exams, but he got a job at a good company. He left that job after a month and spends all his time at the casino. I can't keep surviving on my savings alone. That's absurd. Stop making up stories. Mother-in-law refused to believe me. Her son's past achievements in sports and academics were her pride, and she couldn't accept that he was now unemployed and wasting his time. Her face flushed with anger as she stormed out of the room, only to return moments later holding a knife. What are you planning to do? Please stop, I cried out, backing away and holding my son tightly in my arms. My mother-in-law advanced slowly, the knife in her hand glinting ominously. She pressed the blade's tip against my throat. Enough of your insults to my son. You're destroying Richard's life. You're nothing but a lazy parasite living off a pitiful 70,000. Get out of this house. Her cruel words made me break out in a cold sweat. Even the smallest movement could have put my son in harm's way. Seeing my fear and my pale face, mother-in-law seemed momentarily satisfied and lowered the knife. Good, you understand now. Even parasites like you aren't wanted anywhere. Just keep quiet and do your chores. With a final sneer, she turned and went back to her room, overcome with relief. I sank to the floor. My son, sensing something was wrong, began to sob. As I comforted him, I made a decision. We could no longer stay in this house. The casual threat with a knife was beyond belief. She seemed almost inhuman. Up until now, I had been swayed by Richard's empty promises after each outburst. I thought I needed to support him, that he would fall apart without me, but I had reached my limit. The most important thing now was to protect my son. I couldn't raise him in such an environment. The next morning, my mother-in-law's stern face greeted me with an unexpected command. Emily, prepare for my husband's memorial service next week. All our relatives will be there, so make sure everything is perfect. Without waiting for a response, she left for a neighbor's house. The upcoming memorial service for my father-in-law had been the subject of much discussion. Richard and his mother had planned a grand feast and reminiscences, with me responsible for the preparations. But I had made up my mind. As soon as Richard and mother-in-law were gone, I quickly packed up what little I had, clothes, my son's toys, and diapers, and left their house. Returning to my parents' home, I was met with surprise. My mother, moved to tears, embraced me tightly, while my usually composed father was visibly angry and insisted I take time to rest. That evening, the phone rang. I assumed it was Richard, questioning my absence. Ignoring the call, I blocked his number. The following morning, Richard and mother-in-law arrived at my parents' house, knocking loudly on the door. My parents tried to send them away, but I instructed them to let them in. When I opened the door, Richard and my mother-in-law immediately launched into a tirade. How dare you leave without a word? What kind of wife are you? Isn't it strange to just disappear without explanation? Please, keep your voice down. You're disturbing the neighbors. I replied calmly, struggling to keep my irritation in check. I wanted to ask them who the real problem was. Seeing my composed demeanor, they attempted to push past me, but my father intervened. We'll call the police if this turns violent. Let's discuss this inside, he said firmly. With my parents present, we began the confrontation. Why did you leave without saying anything? They demanded. I reached my breaking point. I answered, I was overwhelmed with taking care of our child and managing my job while you did nothing to help, despite my repeated requests. Well, I was busy too, Richard countered. Busy at the casino, as I've already mentioned. Our son doesn't go to casinos. Stop spreading lies, my mother-in-law snapped. It was clear she still believed Richard was working somewhere respectable. Her view of him as the good son made it hard for her to accept the truth. Ignorance was indeed bliss. So, mother-in-law, where do you think Richard is employed? At a securities company. I saw the job offer letter myself, she replied confidently. Let's call them and confirm if Richard is still employed there. That should clear things up. Richard's face turned pale as he stammered. Wait a minute. What's the issue? If you're really working there, there shouldn't be a problem. Well, that's, Ignoring his flustered state, I dialed the securities company and put the call on speaker so everyone could hear. I inquired about Richard's employment status. Oh, that individual resigned several years ago, if I remember correctly. He was with us for just about a month. My mother-in-law was left speechless, while Richard looked down, his fists clenched in frustration. Did you really quit? Why? She demanded. Because it was frustrating. The work was just menial tasks, and my boss yelled at me for every little mistake. It was harassment. Richard, why didn't you tell us? What have you been doing since then? I'm job hunting. How long have you been job hunting? It doesn't seem like you're getting any offers. How many companies have you applied to? I want to verify. Well, there haven't been any good opportunities. I'll get a job when a good company comes along. You seem quite confident. By the way, you're working part-time now, right? How much did you earn last month? $700. $700? Didn't you tell my mother that Emily was only making $700 and couldn't support herself, so you were the one supporting her? Apparently, Richard had told my mother-in-law that I wasn't earning anything. The truth was, as a dental hygienist, I earned at least $2,000 a month. My mother-in-law's face turned a deep red as she glared at Richard in disbelief. In that tense moment, Richard's anger reached a boiling point. Why are you doing this? It's all your fault for making me look like a fool. His pride was deeply wounded, and he slammed his hand on the table in frustration. This is public defamation. I sighed, barely containing my frustration. If you want to sue, be my guest, but remember, I'll countersue for threatening me with a knife. Lawsuits aren't cheap. Do you have the money for that? Richard clicked his tongue in irritation, likely realizing he'd spent his earnings at the casino. My mother-in-law was stunned by the revelation of Richard's unemployment. I addressed her directly. I've been covering all our living expenses. Richard promised he'd handle the housework and childcare after we got married, but he's done none of that. That's not what I was told, my mother-in-law exclaimed. It was clear she had blindly trusted Richard's version of events. She had been upset when I asked for help with the chores and childcare and even threatened me with a knife. Now, standing in front of my parents and being confronted with her son's shortcomings, she looked visibly uncomfortable. Mother-in-law, you haven't contributed financially either. We've been living on my income all this time. I have no intention of continuing to support this arrangement. I want a divorce. Divorce? You can't just spring that on us out of nowhere, she protested. Yes, that's right. I'll be pursuing it, and I expect compensation for the work I've done and child support as well, I stated firmly. Richard's face was filled with panic. No, that's impossible. I can't afford that. Well, then stop gambling and start paying up, I said coldly. But I can't. I don't have a job. I was stunned by Richard's lack of foresight. You don't have a job because you're too selective about the work you'll do. If you're not willing to do whatever it takes, finding employment will be a challenge. Many people work hard in difficult conditions to make a living. Quitting a job out of frustration or dissatisfaction won't make you more employable. Richard's promise to find a job seemed increasingly unrealistic. I'll have my lawyer handle the divorce proceedings. Please do not contact me from now on. What am I supposed to do? This is so selfish. What will happen to us? My mother-in-law's anger flared at my words. I maintained a deliberately puzzled expression and responded calmly to her outburst. I don't know. Figure out how to support yourselves. You heartless woman. Heartless? You're the last person who should call me that. Do you remember saying I was a nuisance because I was living off a meager $700 a month? You actually held a knife to my throat and told me to get out. And now, the person making that $700 is right here with you. Are you asking him to leave too? As I spoke, my mother-in-law's rage visibly intensified. She leaned forward and grabbed my collar. Stop it. I told you I'll call the police if you touch her. My father intervened forcefully, pulling her off me, but her fury was unabated. Threats with a knife and now physical violence. How barbaric. Don't you think it's better not to make things worse? My mother-in-law glared at me, her resentment clear. Ignoring her, I addressed Richard. I had hoped you'd change, but I'm done waiting. I need to protect our son. I won't be a burden anymore. I'll handle the money, the housework, and the child care if you come back. Handle the money, really? Even with careful budgeting, it's over $1,000 a month. Can you manage that? Richard's face turned ashen. He had never earned more than $1,000 since quitting his job. But I have Mom's pension. What? So you're depending on my pension now? Even my mother-in-law was taken aback by his absurd suggestion. I don't have many options. I'm doing part-time work and can't support us. Can we work something out? My father, who had been listening intently, finally spoke up. Richard, you and your mother have exploited our daughter terribly. If I had known what kind of person you were, I would have opposed the marriage. I will ensure she never returns to your house. I'm severing all ties. But I can't live without Emily. Please give me another chance, Richard pleaded. Don't be absurd. You're already planning to rely on her. A man who lacks the determination to earn a living and make his wife's life better doesn't deserve her. Leave now. For the first time, I saw my father lose his composure. His angry outburst was unsettling, and it left Richard and my mother-in-law visibly shaken. Richard knelt, his head bowed in a pitiful display. The image of the confident, charming man I once knew was gone. Please reconsider, Emily, Richard begged, but my parents were resolute. They had had enough. I refuse to be treated like a servant any longer. Please don't involve me in anything from now on. Once we had forcibly escorted them out, we locked the door. They pounded on it and shouted for a while, but they fled when a passing police officer intervened. After that, I learned that Richard was cut off by his mother and had been evicted from their home. He's now living in a dilapidated apartment, relying on welfare and part-time work to get by. Due to his volatile temper, he has trouble holding on to a single job for long, bouncing between part-time positions at convenience stores, construction sites, and other odd jobs. He's barely managing to scrape together enough to cover the compensation and child support payments, and he hasn't had the chance to look for a full-time job. Rumors suggest he's still frequenting the casino and has even fallen into debt, but I'm not concerned with his troubles. News of Richard's decline spread quickly among our high school classmates, and I received frequent updates and sightings of him. It seems that neighbors have witnessed my mother-in-law throwing Richard out and heard about their constant arguments. His unemployment and the fact that he was left by his wife have become common knowledge. My mother-in-law, who once proudly boasted about him, now rarely leaves her house, clearly embarrassed. With my parents' help in managing the housework and caring for my son, I've been able to focus more on my job. I now have more time to spend with my son, as he no longer needs to be at the childcare center. Everything is going well, and I regret not divorcing sooner. From now on, I'm dedicated to cherishing the time I have with my son and being more present in his life as he grows up.